vlog. Today I am going to be talking about the pre-race checks I do on my bike. That's because in New Zealand it's starting to warm up at long last and we are getting into race season, and so I'm taking my race bike out of hibernation. I'm sure a lot of other people are as well, and what I want to do is talk you through the pre-race checks I do on my bike in the hope that it might help you if you're sort of new to this or you aren't quite sure what to check. So hope you enjoy it. I also do just want to say that I strongly recommend finding yourself a good bike mechanic at a reputable bike store or bike repair place that you can take your bike into on a regular basis, whether that's every 6 months or every year, just to get all the essentials checked, just to make sure it's running safe and not aging different parts prematurely. So what I'm going to do today doesn't replace basic maintenance. It's just some basic checks that you should do ahead of race day. One thing I actually just want to point out really quickly is if you're using a stand like this, clamp the seat in it, not the top tube. Top tube is not strong enough to handle tight clamping force around it. You're much better to use the seat post. So first things first, if you've got a bike with electronic shifting or any other electronics on your bike, then charge them up. Check that the batteries are all good if they're batteries that have to be replaced, and all the others put on charge. So I'm talking about electronic shifting, head units like a Garmin, power meters as well, which this one here has a replaceable coin cell battery in it, but some bikes have a rechargeable power meter. So chuck everything on charge or replace any batteries that are getting low, and I normally do that the night before the race and check them again in the morning to make sure everything's charged up. The next one is tyres. So usually the day before a race I'll pump my tyres up to the pressure that I plan on running or close to the pressure that I plan on running, and then check them again later that day and then again on race morning just to make sure they've held pressure, and then usually on race morning before the race I'll put the pump on them properly and make sure they're up at the pressure that I want to run them at. The other thing I'll do the day before with the tyres is just go over them really closely, brush off any sort of debris or little stones or anything you might have picked up off the road, and just check for any nicks or cuts or maybe little bits of glass or metal that might be lodged in the rubber, because you don't want your race finishing prematurely or having a whole lot of extra time added to your race because you had to stop for a puncture. So just go over the front and rear, make sure they are free of any debris, and then make sure they're holding pressure and pumped up to my race pressure. While I'm checking the tyres, I'll also just do a quick check of the wheels. So there's a few things on the wheels that I check. One of them is the bearings, and you can usually check that firstly just by spinning them and listening for any noise that the bearings might make. Sometimes you might even feel it as you spin it if it feels a bit gritty. The second one you can do is actually hold the rim and sort of try and rock it side to side on the bike, and if there's any play in there that could indicate that bearing might be worn or the bearing cups might be loose. So before the race I just give them a check, give them a spin, listen for any odd noises and make sure they're all good. At the same time I like to check the trueness as well. So particularly on spoked wheels where wheels can go out of true, you can just spin them and eyeball them between the brake pads or eyeball them between the forks and make sure that the wheel spins true. I'm lucky I've got a wheel touring stand and I know how to build in true wheels, so I can keep on top of that myself. But if you do notice that a wheel is out of true, you want to get it into a bike shop that can true it up for you ASAP. Also, while you're checking the wheels, you just want to make sure that they're not rubbing on the brakes, front and back, and then that's the same with a disc brake bike as well. So make sure the rotor is running really nicely between the pads inside the brakes. The good thing with disc brakes is if they do rub, you can hear them pretty clearly, so you'll know then if it needs adjustment. And then the other thing I like to do, which is sort of good practice and something you should do maybe on a weekly basis, is to just go around the wheels, especially on the spoke wheels, and just grab 2 spokes at a time and just give them a bit of a squeeze. I'm not applying much force, but that's just to see if any of them are broken or loose or have detached from the nipple or anything like that. Lubing the chain. Now, this is one thing that you don't have to do before every race, but for some reason people seem to think they've got to cover their chain in lube to make it go faster. And I know this because I used to rent out race wheels, and 9 times out of 10 they would come back just covered in lube because people had gone absolutely crazy with the lube. So you don't always have to lube your chain. You can tell by looking at it whether it's dry or not, or run your fingers down it and see if it feels dry and needs lube. The key thing if you are applying lube is to clean the chain first. So a rag in your hand and basically run the chain through it a few times like that, and that'll get anything off the chain. Do that before you lube it, and lube it the day before the race. Lubing it on race morning is most likely going to end up just flinging lube everywhere, and that's because it takes a bit of time to get into all the moving parts of the chain. So you're better off doing it the night before the race, and do it on the inside of the chain. I'll do a close-up so you can see what I mean by that. There's no point doing it on the outside of the chain because that doesn't touch many of the moving parts within the drivetrain. Then what you want to do is check all your gears. So go through all your gears up and down on both the front chainring and the rear cassette and make sure they're all changing smoothly. There's no funny noises, no hopping. And I would recommend that you do this first of all on the stand, and then go and do a little ride and do it, because gears shift differently whether they're under load or not, and you want them to shift nicely under load because that's how they'll be when you ride them. This is also really important if you've taken your bike off the wind trainer recently, because wind trainers tend to align slightly different to a wheel, so you want to make sure that all your gears are changing really smoothly. So the next thing I do is a quick bolt check. So I go over the whole bike and check all the bolts, so particularly on handlebars, on the seat, brakes, bottle cages, anything that's attached, and make sure that it's all tight enough to stay on. Now the most important tool here is an adjustable torque wrench. So you can see here that by twisting the bottom I can adjust the torque of this wrench, which means once it gets to a certain point, a certain amount of torque on the wrench, it'll click so that you can't over tighten bolts. And this is really important on bikes, because especially with carbon fiber, you can crush carbon fiber if you over tighten it, and you'll find that most bikes have torque specs written on all the bolts so that you know exactly how many Newton meters of torque to set your torque wrench to before you go and start tightening them all up. So another key one to check is that your pedals are tightened up properly. Now these usually require a decent size Allen key. This is an 8mm or a special pedal wrench, and you tighten them up from the back side of the pedal with the Allen key. Now one thing to remember with pedals is that they do not need to be done up stupidly tight. Because of the way they rotate and the fact that one is reverse threaded, the risk of them coming unthreaded while you're riding is almost none, because they're pedaling in the direction that would tighten them. So you don't need to stupidly wrench them up when you put them on, otherwise you'll very much struggle to get them off one day in the future. So hand tight, not stupidly tight, and your future self will thank you for that. Another one that I always check at the same time is the cleat bolts in the bottom of my shoes. So again, these ones are hand tight, and this is just to make sure the cleat doesn't move around when you're putting your shoe on in transition, or trying to get your shoe out at the end of the ride. It's really tricky if some of these come loose and you try and get your foot out of the shoe, the cleat stays in and the shoe moves, you're kind of stuck, and you'll probably end up crashing in front of all the spectators at the dismount line. So give those a check as well. And then once you've done that, take it down off the stand and take it out for a ride. Go up and down your street, go do a light sort of shakedown ride the day before the race if you like, and most importantly, listen. Listen for any odd noises, anything that sounds unusual, creaks, rubbing, gears not changing very smoothly, and get that looked at. But hopefully this has sort of given you everything you need to know to do some real basic checks on your bike before a race. But most importantly, as I said at the top, get your bike serviced regularly by a reputable mechanic, and it'll provide you with some trouble-free riding. But I hope this has helped. I hope you liked the video, and we'll see you